Hey everyone, welcome to the Techstrong gang. Thanks for joining us. This is our first experiment with the Techstrong gang. I'm Alan Schimmel, CEO of Techstrong Group. Let me quickly introduce who we have on the gang today, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're doing. To my immediate left is Techstrong Chief Content Officer, and well known to many of you out there, Mike Vizard. Mike, welcome.
Thanks for being here.
Yep. Joining us remotely, not here at Techstrong Studios, we have our Chief Technology Officer and Principal Research Analyst, Mitchell Ashley. Mitchell,
Good day,
welcome.
everybody. Great to be here.
Yep. And then also joining us from all the way up in Philadelphia, Managing Editor, Sharon Florentine. Hi, Sharon. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Pleasure to have you on. So as I mentioned, this is our first episode of the Techstrong gang, but this has been 2+ years, almost 3 years in the making. When we started Techstrong TV back in the, depths of COVID, the idea was not only to just do a lot of interviews of tech newsmakers and showcase some of the great content that we've amassed at Techstrong over the years, but also to have a running commentary on the state of IT, delving into the kind of farms, the kind of patches that we farm, DevOps, cybersecurity, digital transformation, AI now, of course, and so forth. So, but things don't often go the way you exactly plan them. And as Techstrong TV evolved, it became a series of interviews and other kinds of content. But we wanted to return to that original kernel of having running commentary of a group of some of the experts here at Techstrong. So in today's episode, we have some of the Techstrong experts. In future Techstrong gang experts, we'll be calling in, friends and family of Techstrong who will be joining us for their specific expertise. But we wanted to get a few of these with just the Techstrong folks under our belt. We're open to your suggestions. We hope you like this format. But bear with us as we kind of, get a lay of the land or the lay of the sea here and move forward. All right, with that out of the way, though, let's get started. I wanted to, first of all, talk about some newsworthy kind of headlines and topics that have been recently featured on some of the Techstrong sites. So I thought we'd ask our content czar to kick that off. Mike, why don't you, bring up our first topic here, and the gang will jump in.
Well, happy to be here. It seems like there's this growing concern about the quality of the code that's being created by all these generative AI platforms that are out there. It's, I wouldn't say, been conclusively proven yet, but there seems to be a body of work that suggests that from the analysis that some of this code is deeply flawed, shall we say. And the issue seems to be, it's kind of one of these, it's like an addition of, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that we're seeing more code being written, and a lot of folks who probably don't write great code in the first place are now able to write better code. But at the same time, we're starting to see more of the code that's created is not of the highest quality all the time. A lot of the code that's created by these platforms is inconsistent. A lot of times it contains vulnerabilities. And all of this stems from the fact that we're using a general purpose large language model to train these things, and it was trained using flawed code, so garbage in, garbage out, and here we are. I think this situation will get better as we get more specific LLMs for code trained, but in the meantime, it looks like we're starting to choke on the volume of this code, and the poor DevOps folks at the back end of this process are going to suffer. So I don't know if we need to call a timeout or not, but Mitch, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, it's interesting because I also talked about this on a recent panel. There are several kind of things coming up. One is data poisoning, is what you're talking about, when bad content goes into these LLMs and just sustains itself, right? It doesn't get eliminated and other things get built on it. But I think kind of my conclusion of it right now is the worst thing you can do is copy and paste and move forward and just kind of move on, right? So the way I kind of use that code assist and copilot and things like that is, throw my code in there and ask for suggestions, try to find errors, things like that. Write a routine for me like this, and then I'll take it and adapt it to what the environment really looks like. And I think that's what I would think that's sort of the best practices to do right now. I wouldn't just go with what was given me. It's kind of like, eating food you can't see. It's just like, I want to see this first and see that it's quality stuff before I put it in my code. I think one of my kind of predictions is that we may have some quality metrics specifically around generated code, and we have to enhance our QA processes to focus on generated code, because we already know how to work with developers and their code, but how do we make sure the generated stuff is good? And maybe how do we tell the difference?
So, if I may.
You may.
Look, wah, 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 my internet's not working at 35,000 feet, woe is me. Guys, you got something that's actually generating code. The latest numbers I've seen are something like 60% or 62%, some number like that, of all the code we're seeing on the internet has generative AI fingerprints on it. No one ever said that this thing is going to be the greatest coder in the world out of the box. This is a learning game. This is a long-term game, right? Originally, the numbers we saw were, 60 to 70% of the code it generates is okay, but 30%'s not. That's a lot. That's 3 out of every 10, right? That still gets you in the Baseball Hall of Fame. But it's going to get better. But it's not there right now. But it's still a hell of a lot better than where we were before, because you could take that code and you've already got 60% of it done, and you only have to do the other 40%. Of course, it's finding out what 40% needs to be fixed. I think, Mitchell, you make another great point, which is it's not just about generating code. It's great at checking code, right? So you could use as the front piece or the back piece. You talk about, adapting QA to check generative code. I think we could adapt generative AI to test generative code, right? Maybe by using a separate LLM or something like that, or a different LLM on it. The bottom line is this: it's not 100% today, and yeah, it can turn out some crappy code. But let's not throw out babies with bathwater. This thing's getting better every day. It's going to continue to get better. And there's 1,001 uses for developers to be using it around code.
Sharon, you want to jump in here? I know you spend a lot of time talking to developers, but to Alan's point, it seems like there's certain code, it might be a low-level script where it's fine. And then there's other code where it's hardcore business logic where maybe I do want to check it harder. So, to Mitch's point, do we need some sort of review process? And I hesitate to say this, but another gate in the DevOps process to look at all this.
Well, here's my slightly cranky old lady opinion is, are the same people complaining that generative AI is going to take my software developer job, and oh my God, the code that generative AI is producing for me is crappy. Is the Venn diagram a circle? Like, how, you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth here. So absolutely, I think there needs to be some kind of understanding that, yes, it's a learning process. Yes, you're gonna have to still check the code. It does not yet mean that you can set it, forget it, and walk away. And do you even really want it to? Maybe the point is that generative AI does not replace developers and DevOps jobs. It changes them, and this is how it changes them.
This is true. I'm tired of writing scut code that's boring and takes too long anyway, right?
All that housekeeping code, right?
Again, though, I'll emphasize, there's other things you could do around coding with Gen AI than just generate code. I, as a non-coder, the idea of putting in code and saying, hey, explain to me what this is doing, what it's saying, we love it. Now, but let's, again, we're trying to figure out this Techstrong gang, folks, so bear with us. Mike, this comes out of an article that you did.
I didn't do it. Bill Dorfield.
Bill,
wrote it.
excuse us, Bill Dorfield,
Yeah,
one of
It's a good
our
article,
writers.
too, by the
Great
way.
article.
And to give credit to the people who did the report, it's an outfit called GetClear, I believe, did the initial report. And they are careful to say that it doesn't prove that the code is crappy. It just is another indication of this issue, and it requires further, deeper analysis.
Absolutely. And that is on DevOps.com.
True that.
Okay, so you can check out, if you want to dive deeper on that, go right ahead. Got a couple other topics, and I should mention, of course, we have our full Techstrong TV program for you today, complete with interviews, an episode of the CISO Talk. Actually, there's not a CISO Talk on this episode, I apologize. And some other stuff, but let's jump into our next topic for the gang today, Mike.
Sure. IBM is back with mainframes. Go figure. I mean,
They never left.
Well, let's just say that they're trying to be hanging out with the cool kids. And why I say that is, so there's another iteration of a mainframe that just runs Linux. It's one of these IBM Linux One platforms, but it comes in at the low price point of about $133,000 to start. And what IBM is saying is, hey, if you want to run Linux workloads on this platform, it's centralized, lends itself a little bit better to platform engineering methodologies, and it's going to be a lot less expensive than it would be to run whatever number equivalent of x86 distributed servers there are, because the total cost is less because you got to stitch all that stuff together and manage it, and the weight of that distributed environment gets pretty heavy. So it seems like IBM, for the first time, in my opinion at least, is actually pitching a mainframe outside of its base, right? It historically has always said, you know, it's $1 million club and we're going to sell you another mainframe to that existing base. They've lost share over the years because a lot of folks at the low end of the mainframe market left. I think that they're trying to get that base back, and they might be cool again. So, Sharon, I'll get your thoughts on this thing, but you've been around IBM and those folks for a long time. What's your sense of what's going on here?
Oh, geez. I think you're right that they are definitely trying to regain some of that. Maybe we don't call it a foothold. Maybe it's a toehold in that lower end space. You know, a lot of people talk about the mainframe like it's not still running so many critical systems in, you know, banking, travel, even some retail government systems. It's still there, and it is still growing. There's even a movement to try and figure out how to modernize a lot of the mainframe applications using cloud native methodologies and cloud native architectures and tie that whole system together. So I think there's definitely room for IBM to make moves in that space for sure. And I think making it this cost efficient is a great way to get in there and grab that business.
So, first of all, look, I think IBM's mainframe business is alive and well, right? On the lower end, have we seen some folks drop out? No one, very, very few people pull their mainframe out, because the amount of money you have invested in those systems and the jobs they do, it's just not practical. But those few that do, and then those that are, maybe this is targeted at, it's not a question of the cost as much as it is, I want to use modern architecture, AKA the cloud, right? And so what often happens, though, is they'll move the front end to the cloud and keep the back end on the mainframe, right? They don't throw the mainframe out. However, it's nice for an IBM salesperson to say, starting at the low price of $130,000 versus, hey, you need $1 million to get in the door here. Now, it may very well be that $130,000 system winds up costing you $500,000 at minimum when all is said and done. But that being said, you know, dollar for dollar, penny for penny, it's hard to beat the mainframe performance, security, reliability, and I just don't think it's going anywhere. There is the big modernization push for mainframe, And, they run Linux, it runs Kubernetes, you can run just about, a bunch of different languages on them now. It's not your grandpa Z. And, I applaud IBM for coming out with, this price point. Maybe it'll keep some stuff from migrating to the cloud.
Mitch, you
Well,
ready
if
to...
I understand,
sorry.
this is a Linux, specifically Linux-based
Right.
system, yeah.
It's running Linux 1. It's actually an upgrade. They have an existing enterprise server, Linux 1.3. This is the Linux 1.4. And one of the things I noted about in the article on DevOps.com is they're positioning it both for modernization, as you were talking about, and also for data and AI processing. It has something like 6 teraflops, I think, on it. And kind of keeping that data contained within an environment that you're managing and things like that. So to me, it's like if you're modernizing apps and, some of those may not stay on the mainframe, they're modernizing into something else. Well, run it on an x86 server, right? Or that kind of in-class processor. So it's to keep customers on their platforms. Seems to me.
To Mitch's point, though, a lot of the workloads are becoming much more data intensive, especially around AI. And that lends itself better to a mainframe. I mean, let's be honest here. Some of the throughput issues that you see on x86 servers, they're not quite as good as the old-fashioned mainframe, even though that mainframe is, 6 decades old now. But there's a new chip in there that IBM built specifically for this purpose. It's like 5.2 gigahertz, and then it's hooked up to all that I/O throughput they have. So if you're running AI workloads, it's hard to ignore.
All those good old workhorse workloads, right?
Yeah.
Claims processing.
Yeah, I don't know, generative AI, NVIDIA chip kind of stuff is optimized for mainframe, but there's a place for it. Absolutely.
Yeah, their nuance on that is that they want to run the inference engine, so they want the deployment side of that equation.
Yep. All right, let's move on.
All right. I'd love to get your opinion on this topic, but we had a video interview with a fellow from AWS who runs their enterprise division, and he was talking about how cybersecurity professionals need to figure out how to say no again. We went through this whole process where the cybersecurity folks were beat up and said, you can't be the office of no. And so now we greenlighted all this stuff, and now we have more security issues than ever. So Clark Rogers, who is the head of enterprise strategy for AWS, is saying to cybersecurity folks, hey, you got to put your foot down. Some of this stuff shouldn't be allowed to run. We've been around this conversation full circle. Maybe I'll start with Mitch, but what do you think here? I mean, you've been in the cybersecurity space for both ends. You've lived through the, I am the office of no, to the, wait, let me enable this, and now we seem like we're coming full circle. What's going on, my friend?
I think we're regressing to our youth. Isn't the first word most babies learn is no? Right? So, well, I think it's speaking up, right? And I'm not sure. I didn't get to watch your interview. I'm going to go check it out, Mike. But it's just don't roll over, right? Don't roll. Just, the business got things to do, got things to accomplish. They're looking for you to play your role in it. And your role is to keep things secure and make sure they don't run things off the rail and, end up with on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, as the CEO used to tell me. So I'd be curious when, talking with Clark, actually, he's thinking in terms of cloud architecture and hybrid architectures and things that are running in AWS. But it's probably just be open to the possibilities and bring what you know about how to make things successful versus just saying, yeah, we'll do whatever you want.
I think the tenor and the tone of the conversation is changing a little bit with these new SEC rules that are holding organizations a little more accountable for what happens in their application security, and the cybersecurity folks are at the back end of that thing. A couple of folks, of course, are wearing striped suits these days, whether they deserve to or not. But the question becomes, if I'm going to be held to that level of accountability, then maybe I do need the authority to say no, because it's not fair to have me be in charge of this or be held accountable for it. but have no authority over it. I don't know what you
We've
think.
had conversations on CISO talk about this, of CISOs being in a position where they can't say no when there's a security incident and we just want you to do this, right? And they're like, hey, I'm the one that's going to get fried, right? If this goes bad. So don't put yourself in that situation.
Sacrificial lambs, what do you think?
You know, I don't know who wants to be a CISO today, but
It's maybe come
I mean,
rare
that's
here.
part of the issue. But I mean, you know, it's an interesting thing. I remember a survey we did a couple of years ago where everyone acknowledged that security were the people who say no too often, but the non-security people counted on the security people to say no because they said we were going too fast and someone has to be able to apply a brake. And I think that's part of the role of the CISO and the security team is, you know, danger ahead, use caution, apply the brakes if you have to, slow it down around the curve. But it has to be done judiciously and reasonably. It can't just be a blanket no to everything, right? Then you desensitize people and you know. So like everything else in life, you got to strike a balance there. But that being said, we've certainly, you know, security has become the people. Yes, we can, right? And sometimes you can't. Is the bottom line. So you need to apply reasonable, logical, you know, thoughts into what is plainly dangerous and what, you know. Maybe you could cut a corner here and there. But, you know, I'm just afraid these pendulums, they swing from here to there to there to here. I need that pendulum right here. And we'll see, you know, what happens as a result of this.
Just don't get hit by the pendulum.
Yeah. Sharon, what do you think? What are you hearing from folks over in the land of Security Boulevard where you edit that site? So,
Well, here's a slightly different angle. And like Mitch, I haven't had a chance to check out this conversation. So I will just say that one of the things I see from the CISOs that write for us or folks that contribute content and who are close to their CISO is it's often a struggle for CISOs to communicate risk and the threat prioritization, especially if they're reporting up to a board. So a board may say, hey, why aren't we using XYZ tool? Or, hey, I heard about this really cool technology that we want to use in our organization. And I think, you know, we're going to buy it and we're going to implement it and we need you to make this happen. And for the CISO to come back and go, yeah, I'm sorry, this has not been security tested, it's not vetted correctly, we've seen such and such implement it and bad things happen. And then the board is going, what, you're telling us no? That's not how this works. We say jump and you say how high. So I think CISOs are kind of caught in this middle ground between they need to please the board and do what they say, but they also have a on the ground understanding of what the actual risks are. And so communicating that, the risk, the threat level, how this could impact the entire business is difficult. So we, you know, I see a lot of conversations happening around how do we actually communicate this to the board so they get it, so that when we tell them no, they understand why and appreciate that we're telling them no.
Look, the whole liability, what's driving all this, right, is the liability now that are being placed on CISOs from the SEC and other law enforcement agencies. And if the CISO is not going to put his foot down and say no, it could, as Mitchell said, they could fry for it, right? Someone is going to wind up with you know, serious legal jeopardy.
Career-ending move, we call that.
Yeah. Well, transition.
I think that there's a breakdown.
Spending more time with their family.
Yeah, there's a breakdown here, though, because the CISOs get in front of the board and then they start talking cybersecurity geek talk to them, and the board goes, I don't know what you're saying, but At the end of the day, the board guy comes back and says, hey, we just spent X amount on security for the last 3 years, and you don't seem to be able to tell me if we're any more or less secure than we were before, because they don't realize that the landscape keeps constantly changing, and the tactics and techniques evolve. So there isn't this like, oh, I'm going to spend X and we're going to be secure. It's kind of like you need to continuously spend X and maybe you'll be lucky and to be secure enough. It's a difficult conversation to have with folks who are kind of finance minded, and I think that's the root of the issue.
But that's part of the job of a CISO, is to translate tech security to business talk, right? And the best CISOs do that. You're not just the security dude. You've got to be that bridge between the business and the security. And I think that, that's definitely part of the CISO's role.
All right, so CISOs need MBAs. That's what I got out of that.
Yep. Hey, I wanted to bring up a fourth subject, if we have time, on Techstrong Gang today. Mitch and I are just back from Boston when we went on kind of a goodwill tour, meeting with a bunch of organizations, end users, vendors, and so forth. And for my friends out there in the tech world, man, we are feeling your pain, believe me. And, universally, Mike and Sharon, Mitchell and I heard it's layoff season. That was a term. I didn't realize we had a season for layoffs. But virtually every single org we met with, every single vendor we met with, has been through layoffs and maybe in fact planning more layoffs. And unfortunately, the people getting hit the hardest seems to be from our friends in marketing, product marketing, not so much product and engineering, but even sales. Let's call them some of the non-technical roles. And look, this is a direct result of interest rates, venture funding, valuations, paying for the last, 2 years of drunken parties. But nevertheless, it's a real thing in tech. And Mike and I were talking about it earlier today. It's interesting because, we're getting such great news around the economy. GDP's growing and unemployment is low and jobs are being added. But yet I have a lot of friends in the tech world who are looking for jobs right now and not finding jobs that quickly. So, number one, I personally feel that pain and empathize, and we go through it here at Techstrong even. But, you have a theory, Mike, that this is probably, well, at least maybe we've turned the curve up.
I think we've turned the curve on it just because at the same time that the quote unquote, shall we say, investor community is saying be more profitable to these companies, they're also pointing out that they're going to increase their quotas. So they recognize that there's opportunity out there, and there's plenty of businesses outside of tech that are consuming more tech than ever and are more dependent on it than ever. They just are trying to figure out some model where they can have their proverbial cake and eat it too, because they just want the margins to be higher. At least startups are slightly different because the interest rates and where they get their money from. But your average tech company that is kind of in existence is struggling with this profitability equation that is coming out of the Wall Street side. And I think, as you get more profitable, though, you're going to have to start to spend more money to drive the revenue. So I think it will come around full circle. But as they used to say with our children, it's a phase, and they'll get over it.
I hope so.
I think too that fourth quarter last year was the what's going to happen. We don't know what next year's going to be like. They're kind of frozen in some ways. And some of what we also heard was people are now getting their budgets, they're getting their goals, they're getting, so we'll start to see some kind of more movement of the flywheel, and maybe that's more spending in certain areas. But hopefully that layoff season, we heard the term that Alan talked about, is coupled with, and here's where we're moving forward and what we need to get done. And that's where, sales and opportunity and customers and what your organization does are all important.
I mean, we're all slaves to the cycle, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll end it with this. I think the cycle we're in now values value more than growth, right? So they're looking more at the profitability bottom line than they are at the top line, which is a very different, focus than tech has been in for some time, which was all top line focused. And look, again, I'll just say, folks out there looking, if there's something we could do to help, and I've had friends reach out to me to help, and I've written plenty of references and reached out to people if they're hiring, feel free to reach out to us. We feel the pain, and let's hope it gets better for all of us.
This will end shortly when customers start complaining about the fact that there's no customer service, they have no idea what these vendors are up to, and start shifting dollars around, and then everybody's going to wake up and go, hey, you know what? Maybe this is a bad plan.
I hope so. Hope so. All right. I think that's going to wrap our opening Techstrong gang. It's first time we've tried this. We hope you like this format. I think it's a little better than just the playlist with one interview into the next. We are going to be introducing the individual interviews and sections, and you still have the playlist for Techstrong TV. Great content on there. And you'll see the gang, more faces and, rotation in the gang over the coming days and weeks. But for now, this is Alan Schimmel at Techstrong Group. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of Techstrong TV.